Welcome to another episode of the Simple Man Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Batisto. Today's guest is Al Fontes. Al Fontes is in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. He was a big part of the transition from California Wrestling being a newsletter to being online using the website. And really excited to have him on the show. A hot topic that always seems to happen right after the state tournament is, should California go into multiple divisions? Now, as somebody that's kind of been, for a very long time, very much a traditionalist when it comes to wrestling. I've always wanted a one division state championship. With Al Fontes, I think we were kind of similar in that regard. But now that he's moved to Idaho, and Idaho has more than one division, they're able to kind of look at some things a little bit differently and have that different perspective. And especially with Al Fontes being a guy that just has all of this data on hand, like brackets from the 1970s all the way until now, getting data on how many guys are going from California high school wrestling to national wrestling, how many of them are competing in college. It really is able to kind of create this picture to where now that we have all this data and this information, what's best for California wrestling. And we get into this conversation where I think you guys are going to enjoy it. And I think it's worth talking about, especially if, you're one of the higher ups that's working for the CIF and kind of controls that. But looking forward to share this conversation with you guys. Before we get to it, however, just want to remind you guys right now we're on CaliWrestling.com. That's where all of our episodes are on Spotify are posted. We're still on YouTube. We're still on Spotify. Been trying to post a little bit more on Instagram, Twitter/X, and TikTok. So if you guys get a chance, make sure you guys like, subscribe, leave a comment. Really appreciate all of just the things that people have been telling me and telling Sean, Brady, Oren, Brian, Carlo, all the guys that have been on the podcast. Just been hearing a lot of great things and appreciate the support. If you guys want to continue to support us, please just like, subscribe, comment. Again, really just trying to just celebrate some of the coaches and celebrate obviously the wrestlers and just talking about California wrestling. That's what this is about. So appreciate the love, appreciate the support, and hope you guys enjoy the show. Like, I know the history of the California wrestler, there wasn't really a lot of news coverage up in Northern California. It was all kind of in the South, right, for wrestling. And that's kind
most
of
of our
how it got put together.
concentration was likely, when I was doing it for a lot of years, it was Central and Southern would control a lot. CCS was doing well in the 90s, in the late 80s. But Northern's always had a kid here and there. North Coast had their share of kids. So, but the bulk of it was Doc B, 5 counties, that kind of environment. Yeah, that's where the real wrestling talent was coming from, most of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about those areas, I mean, you get guys that go off and they have success in high school, and then they go off and wrestle in college, and then they come back.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you go in the Bay Area, especially now, like, that was my plan. I wanted to go back to Santa Cruz and teach and coach wrestling. But the cost of living is so dang high. It's like, I'd rather just stay in Bakersfield and, live in a nice, cheap home in a nice part of town. It's like, if I went back to Santa Cruz, I couldn't do that. I think that's kind of what we're missing in some of those areas.
Yeah, so if you look at the history, so you go back in time in the CCS, because I looked at all the data and all the medals from 1973 up to now, and you've seen a radical change in the North Coast. All the housing, it used to be there was teachers that became coaches that ran clubs. I mean, you had James Logan, had Tom Rosenthal, where I went Steve Page, Greg Chappell, and what they were doing up in Ukiah, these guys. And then the CCS, you had a lot going on there. But when these guys retired, it was difficult to have a teacher come in because a house is $1 million, and it was really difficult to recruit. Plus, they were drop-in programs, so you had less college wrestlers coming back and coaching.
Mm-hmm. Like, losing San Jose State was big. It's like that whole area. I mean, that's such a high population area, and there's a lot of wrestling schools there. Like, I think, how many high schools are there, and they all have wrestling programs for the most part.
Yeah. And if you look at what's happening in the state of California, is you have roughly 850 high schools. Okay, just this year alone, I looked it up, just under 700 schools had a qualifier at the Masters meet, section master right before state. State had 235 schools represented. you have 112 medals. But then you look at who's placing, just two schools alone, the top two teams took home around 21% of the medals. So if you really look at what's going on in California, if you take Gilroy out of CCS, what does that mean in CCS? How many medals are they going to get? If you take
Maybe,
Poway,
well, if you include girls, it's different. But if you're just talking about the
we're just
boys,
talking boys right now. If you take,
was there maybe one medalist?
they had two. They had two, one,
Oh, Las
a team from
Gatos.
Los Gatos and one
Yeah,
from Palma. So that's three, and the rest
three.
were from. If you look at San Diego, Poway there was 14 medals in San Diego section. Poway had 12. That's 86% of the medals. The
Yeah.
other two were from Granite Hills.
Mhm.
After that, so you take Poway out of San Diego, it is on the decline. North Coast, they're dropping because De La Salle has been dropping a little bit, and some of the schools have been dropped. They had two medals out of 120 high schools, right? You look at Oakland's been the same. San Francisco's had two medals since 1973, both from the same school, Galileo. So they have an LA City's the only section, I think they had up to 12, maybe medals since 1973. They've only had two champions, with the kid from Birmingham being the
Mhm.
last. And the first was, I forget the kid, it was several years ago. I think it was Moreno Valley. I can't remember what school. I'd have to look it up. But if you look at the state as a whole, what has happened is a vast majority of these areas, these super power schools are controlling. I think the top 10 teams this year, and I can send you all the numbers, the top 10 teams brought home 56% of the medals. The top 10 teams. That leaves
Dang.
840 schools that didn't even medal. So if you look at the bigger picture, that's why the issue of going to divisions. I moved to Idaho, and I was used to the one power state, and I loved it. It's almost like when you watch the CIF state tournament on day two, when you are the quarters and the semis, it's like being at the Big Ten. I mean, it's power matches going. I moved to Idaho. We got 100 high schools in four divisions. Now, granted, it's not the same depth, but we still, the quality of kids coming out of Idaho is pretty good. The average kid
Mhm.
is well coached, because what we're experiencing there is all these guys that went to Boise State, there's probably 70, 80 coaches throughout the state that wrestled in college, maybe even more. We got Chris Owens, who was a coach at Boise State, went to Oklahoma. He runs the freestyle Greco. We got Yvonne Ivanov. So in Idaho, although we have less numbers, if you want to be national level, you can, if you're willing
Mhm.
to put the time in. We just don't have the depth, right?
Yeah.
As a California, but per capita, we're seeing it within the state. But if we went to divisions in state, even though we have 100 schools, what would happen? The same thing would happen. That power schools would control a vast majority of the medals, and a lot. We have small schools that only have 50 schools. I mean, 50 students. Some have 100 in some of these rural areas. And if we had a one division state tournament, I think a lot of the schools would never see a medal, maybe once in a blue moon.
I mean, if you're talking about trying to grow the sport, right? It's like I
Yeah.
think like even just in Bakersfield, like there was a team. There's a couple teams that have won Division 3 or Division 4 Valley titles, and it's like the school makes this huge deal out of it because when they say, "Dang, you won a Valley title," all these other sports are in multiple divisions. Football's in multiple divisions, baseball's in multiple divisions. So when you win Valley, it's like, dang, like you did this awesome thing. Like they pull out the hats and the shirts. Like if you won a conference title for college, like they pull out the hats and shirts. They make it a big deal. They get rings, and I
Hmm.
think that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm not necessarily in camp of just giving things out to people, but I think
I
it's
agree.
something to where I don't think it's going to water down wrestling at all. I actually think it's going to lead to more opportunities for kids to go to college and go get more opportunities to go and wrestle beyond, where they're at in their town and come back and hopefully be able to be in positions to get back to the sport.
No, I think you bring up a good point. And I've been looking at, I love wrestle the best of the best. I don't like to be, politically correct. Everyone needs a medal. I don't believe in that. But if you're looking to grow wrestling, I think having divisions is important, because you have to look at it in a different perspective. The cream will always rise to the top, right? So, like I was saying, right now in Idaho, we got 100 high schools, four divisions. In the last 2 years, we have had 21 kids go Division 1, and over 50 or 60 kids wrestling overall in the division. That's just the boys, right? This year alone, we have like, I think 9 kids going to Division I, a lot of Big Ten schools. So the quality's there. So if you look at the per capita of 100 high schools, we have 21. I think California had like 50 kids go. The last 2 years has been really good for California. They have had 50, but they got 850 schools. So they're underachieving if you go by the mathematical ratio. We're overachieving. So because you have divisions, it doesn't mean more kids. However, how many kids in California made the round of 16 that were good enough to place that beat guys there that quit right after that? And that's your point, right? They don't want to wrestle anymore.
Yeah.
Um, Considering that if you look at the bigger picture right now, I think only 1.2% of high school wrestlers, boys, there's like 250,000 now, I think, in the country, roughly. It's fluctuating. 1.2% even go to Division I. So you're talking 98% of wrestlers in high school will never wrestle in college, right? And like yeah, like you said,
Yeah.
in Idaho, and I never knew this. I never had this conceptual framework until I moved there and got to see it. We got kids in the 2A from these small towns. They look the same. They're just as happy as Poway or when they're getting their championship. The place is jam packed. And these people are in this bubble and they have no clue. And the kids that are exceptional, that are going to go that next level, they're wrestling in Fargo. They're wrestling in folk style nationals. I mean, Idaho has won 3 folk style nationals just in the last 4 years. So the quality is there, but we have a lot of kids that, if they wrestled into one division, may not place, and that's a vast majority, but there are always going to be the exceptions. And I think, like you were saying, if California, say it went to 3 divisions, still be quality. 90% of the matches would be pretty solid throughout the tournament.
Yeah, well, I think what you said, if you take one of those round of 16 kids that if you put him anywhere else, he'd probably be a state placer.
Mm-hmm.
But he loses in the round of 16. It's like, dang, I suck. And even to be honest,
Yeah,
that's how I felt. I made it to round 12. I didn't even place. I'm like, I suck. And I remember going on a recruiting trip, and this kid that wrestled in North Dakota was like, "Hey, what'd you do in state?" I'm like, "I didn't place." And he's like, "Oh, like how many matches you won?" 4. What? You went 4-2 and didn't place? I'm
yeah,
like, yeah. That was like, you're the one that's weird. I'm not the one that's weird. But now
no,
that, actually doing camps and going outside of the state, I'm meeting up with all these Division III and Division II guys, and they're telling me their stories. And I'm like, that's awesome. I wish we had more of that in California because, again, it's kind of like a bubble in itself, too. It's like if you're round of 16, you're round of 12, you don't place, you think I suck. I go back and forth with my buddy Carlo Franciati a lot. He's another CCS guy, wrestled out of St. Francis.
mm-hmm.
Winning does a lot for a kid. Winning a
Mm-hmm.
little bit does a lot. It's like, I placed 7th or 6th at the state tournament. Yeah, maybe I can go wrestle in college versus if I go around at 12 or 16, now I'm not going to be good enough.
No, you bring up a good point. And like I said, 98% across the country that wrestle in high school will not go on to college. And of that, I think Division I's 1.2% go, but that doesn't count the guys that make it after they get there, right? It drops off even more, the ones that make the teams. NAIA Division II, 3 are all in that 1 point something. And I think a total of 5% if you count all the divisions. But California, even in 3 divisions, what will happen, like with Idaho, when they come out there, the coach will say, "Oh, you're a 2-time state champion. That sounds good. What did you do at Fargo?
Yeah.
What did you do at Folkstyle Nationals? Did you place?" We had a bunch of Idaho kids go to the Doc B, and some of them were Fargo national champions, like Mac Mager. He won it his sophomore year. Last year he took 3rd, and this year he took 7th. He was up in the upper weight, but he was like, and he's going to Missouri. But he got to see the difference between being in a state tournament where you may have a couple good matches to where every single match is going to be a grind, and it'll prepare you for that Division I. I would say, correct me if you think I'm wrong, I think at least the top 16 and 20 at the California State Tournament are good enough to go NAIA or higher.
Absolutely.
Once you,
Absolutely.
yeah, and how many of those
Absolutely.
guys don't go on? I mean, it's a gold mine. It's a gold mine. I think if we had more kids placing in the different divisions, yeah, may help the JC programs even more grow. I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this then. Now that wrestling is I mean, there's all these wrestling podcasts. There's all these Instagram profiles with social media. There's TikToks. Coaches are informed about California. I feel
Mhm.
like they know it's a one class. They know how large the state is. But the issue is like, are you willing to put in your time and look at the brackets and pay attention to some of these kids? Because again, somebody that's talented, that's in the top 20 in the state, they might not even get recruited to go to these other places or as well recruited to go to these other places, even though they might be good enough.
Yeah, that's true because coaches know they know if you placed at Fargo in freestyle, they expect so much from you. If you say you're a California state champion, a state medalist, they know what level of wrestling you're competing in. I tell
Mhm.
you, when you watch CIF state, especially in that's the last day, the medal matches are in the quarters and say it's like watching the Big Ten. I mean, the
Yeah.
matches are tight. I mean, especially this year, it's like, whoa. And there's hardly any fluff matches where it's a battle all the way. Difference between a guy placing and 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 a guy not placing could be losing in double overtime in a round of 16. I mean, it's
Yeah.
that close. I mean, Villarreal barely won a match in the round of 16 sophomore year, and it was a controversial call. He ends up winning. The other guy, Mario Lopez, they said took down, but nonetheless, he wins. He goes to the next match. He's in the semis against Gascon from Kingsburg, losing with like 12 seconds, hits that roll, puts him on his back, losing 3-0 to the Selma kid,
Yeah.
Cisneros.
I remember
Boom.
that. That was so wild. Like everybody was clapping, like, oh, he's going to be a four timer. And then just at the very end, wham, hits that freaking throw. And everybody
And
just went, oh my gosh.
Cisneros is that much could have lost. He was right there in that
Yeah.
quarterfinal
Well,
match.
I mean, obviously he was a great high school wrestler, but having those close wins at some point is going to catch up to you, especially if somebody has a big move. And Villarreal was slick. He was pretty slick in high school.
Yeah,
But
no, and that's it. But California is a very unique thing. But at the end of the day, I never really thought about when I came to Idaho. I'm like, okay, it's multi divisions. I'm like, yeah, there's some good competition here. In fact, the cream of the crop in Idaho is able to compete with the cream of the crop almost everywhere. They won Fargo and Graco. They're up in the top team. But the average kid is well coached, but the average kid may not place at a power state, right? Per
yeah.
se. But the quality of wrestling is really good. But there's nothing like the CIF state tournament. And people don't talk about it takes 2 or 3 weeks to get to state.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
it's in some
grind.
places it's a grind.
Yeah.
Like you
And
talking Central Valley, like Frontier, they're in that Division 1 valley, and it's like we have Buchanan, we have Clovis North, Clovis West, we have Bakersfield High School, and it's like every single match is tough, and you have kids that haven't lost 3 matches in a tournament and still can move on to the next round. I mean, it's
mhm.
crazy to think about.
No, but I just like we were saying, I truly this subject of going divisions, and I used to be that, oh, we got to stay one divisions. But as time went on, I got wiser and older. I looked at the bigger picture. Multiple divisions is not going to hurt the number of top guys going to college. It's still going to be about the same. In fact, you may have more kids wrestle in JC or may other opportunities in the Division 2, may more stick around more. But at the end of the day, and then especially with California, and I'll send this information to you. I've been analyzing all the numbers and really deep. And some of the stats may be off a little bit, but you're looking at the numbers. And I just give you an example of, let me see, when you look at the 1970s, when they first started the CF state tournament in 1973, they had the NorCal, SoCal, plus they had a Central Valley tournament in the San Diego, but it was mainly those two. They brought it one division. The first decade, there was 25 schools that made the top five, 25 schools. Then you go down to the 1980s, 31 schools made the top five. And then you go to 1990s, 26, it dropped just a little bit. And then 19 or 2000s to 2009, you had 17. Fast forward to 2010 to 19, you had 14 schools. It keeps dwindling down.
Yeah.
And then just this decade. And the only school that's probably been in all 4 or 5 decades, let me see, Clovis has had a top five score in every decade. Poway from the 80s on. Buchanan just started in the 90s. But you got some of those old schools, they're were doing well in the 70s in the CCS or even some of the Sound, coach leaves and it just dropped,
Yeah, like
and
Independence High School, like they had some really good teams. Whitney, I think, was like they won one of the maybe the first couple state tournaments.
yeah, that was I think Monte Vista, and you had Mount Miguel. I think Mount Miguel, 70s, you have Monte Vista, Andrew Hill, Bolsa Grande. These are some of those teams that were doing well in the 70s. El Dorado down in
Mhm.
Central, Placentia did well. Remember Antioch had that one team back in 1988.
Yeah.
Capistrano Valley. I mean, these were teams, or there was a team called Oceana in the CCS, and they were producing teams.
And
You
it's
know,
like it's like what happens. It's like a
the
coach
coach
leaves and there's
retires and they
program turnover. That's
yeah,
it.
turnover. And, we haven't seen anything much. I mean, without Gilroy in the CCS, I know Los Gatos has been doing pretty good the last couple of years. Varela's been there and he's been building some tough kids, but we're just not seeing a lot of schools produce medals. It just seems like those power schools are getting a vast majority. And I'm not faulting them, but it seems like only the top 1 or 2% is bringing home a vast majority of the medals right
Well,
now.
let me ask you this: if we switch to divisions logistically, how many divisions do you think we would have or should have?
I think three,
Three. And then
three.
making it something to where if you're having success, maybe every 2 years or every year, you have an opportunity to move up or get relegated down.
Yeah, I think the power schools, if they want to be in that bigger division or that division, I don't know if you can either do it by school size. That's one way, but if you have a power school like a St. John Bosco that may be in a lower division but wants that high level competition against the Poways and the Clovises, yeah, I'd say they should do that.
And
And
I
you
think
probably would have the 16-man bracket instead of the 32. I mean, a
yeah.
Rabobank, where I'm at in Idaho, we have 16 mats. We're in this big football stadium at Idaho State, and you got 4 divisions, and we got girls now. I think Idaho would be better with maybe 2 or 3 divisions. It'd be a little bit stronger. But like I said, some of these small schools in the 2A, 1A barely have 100 kids in their whole school. We're talking rural towns.
Yeah.
And they're having some success and doing really well, but it, it's really hard to compete against the Meridians and teams like that, Post Falls.
So if we switch two divisions, I mean, I love mechanic. It's Mechanics Bank Arena now. It's hard. I still call
I
it
know
Rabobank.
Rabobank.
Uh, I mean, that's such a great spot. I feel like for the state tournament, it's central. Even just the minute details, like the bathrooms, like they're always like accessible, and
Yeah.
the food's right there, and it's just a great environment as a competitor and as a
Mhm.
coach and as a spectator. If we do multiple divisions, do you feel like that takes away from that kind of event, or is that something that we can still build and make it a strong event for California wrestling?
I think you can still have a strong tournament. Here's one thing that really bothered me all that. I've been in wrestling in when I was in California for over 30, 40 years, right? I mean, I lived it. Idaho's just been the last 4 years I've been there. So I ate, slept, thought, breathed California wrestling. I've been to almost every state tournament from like the 80s all the way up to until the COVID year, right? 2020. Um, I think when you go to the state tournament and you see the first few rounds and some of the rounds hardly anyone's in the stadium with that state championship, that it seems like there's not enough people there watching. Only the real hardcore fans may come at the quarters and stuff. In Idaho, that event center is jam-packed the whole weekend. 2A, 3A, 4A, there's so many people, their families, cities coming there. I think if they were to go multiple divisions and even with the girls, they probably would fill that place up throughout the whole. You look at some state tournaments, they have divisions. It's not hurting Pennsylvania. They got, I think, 2 or 3 divisions. It's not
Mhm.
hurting Ohio. I think they have like 3 divisions. The places are jam. You look at Colorado, it's jam packed. You come to the California State tournament, and it's like half the tournament, hardly anyone's there. Maybe the coaches, some of the wrestlers, and a few parents. It's not packed, and I think they can fill that house if you had more divisions.
For sure. And that again, like if you're thinking about the number of schools that would be represented at the state tournament, that number would go up.
Mhm.
And being at the state tournament, I mean, especially if you look at for some of these smaller schools, just like how you say what's happening in Idaho. Well, hey, we're going to go to the state meet. Let's make a vacation out. Let's go support our small town, our team that's going to go and compete. But I think especially with that, and I think with girls, I mean, maybe one or two divisions, but I think it's kind of a lot of teams go or they get represented at the girls' state tournament, and I feel like it's not quite like how it is for the boys yet, where that's like that small number of teams are kind of rising to the top. I feel like it's a little more spread out.
Yeah, it's happening. It's happening with the girls. I watched the beginning of California girls, and it started as an open tournament. I think they were in Visalia. Then they sanctioned it with the boys, I believe, and now it's a sanctioned sport. They brought it to Rabobank, or what's it called now? The mechanical. What's it called?
Mechanics Bank.
Yeah, yeah. I was just calling it Bakersfield, right? And you started seeing more and more girls, the numbers going. In Idaho in 2022, we start in 2020, we had an open state tournament. We didn't stop wrestling during COVID. They wrestled during the COVID pandemic too.
There you
We had
go.
some restrictions, but people still wrestled, and hardly
Yeah.
anyone got sick, believe it or not. Um,
Crazy. Crazy.
yeah, it is
And
crazy. Some of the coaches did, but all our wrestlers that got sicker with the regular flu the following year, believe it or not. Um, is that the girls started in 2020 with an open tournament, I think in 2019 too, and they had like 60 girls. By the time we had an official sanctioned tournament in 2022, they were up to like 300. Now we're edging towards 1,000 girls. So it's doing the same trend as California. And now you're starting to see our incoming freshmen that are starting to dominate some of the girls that were state placers the year before. The quality is getting better. And in California, I saw the same thing. But if you had 2 divisions for girls and 3 divisions for guys, you would pack that Rabobank. And at the end of the day, the cream would rise to the top. The same kids are going to go to Division One NAIA. You may even get more kids go to NAIA. I don't think that number will go up exponentially, but you'll
yeah.
get more kids. But there's going to be, I'm telling you, the families that are watching 2A, the place is roaring. You feel it's almost like when Poway won a state title or Buchanan, they're screaming. These kids are in cloud nine, right? And they're like, the feeling feels the same, right? It's no different. And at the end of the day, 98% don't go on to college, only the 2%. And those 2% or the 1 point something percent that are in those divisions, they're elite people. They're training
Yeah.
with, in Idaho, we have what we call the best on best regional centers. Chris Owens has started this to where in regions, the elite kids train twice a week, especially in the summer, and they drill and train under high competition to prep for Fargo and stuff. And it's happening through the state. So we'll get kids from the rural areas driving 2 hours just to come get that kind of practice coming in. It's high level. So at the end of the day, I think you'd see a net positive and more participation at the high school. I think it would grow it a little bit more and bring some more of the hardware. So like I said, Poway has been in the top 35 times, I think, in the
That's
last,
wild.
in the last since 1973. But a lot of schools, there's only, I think, 18 teams have won the state tournament total since 1973.
Yeah, I think I was looking at some factoid, and it was like I think about half about half of the state title, state championship teams came from the track six. It was like I think three for Clovis West. There's a pretty good chunk that are Clovis, and I think the other one's Buchanan.
Yeah, Clovis has had 13, Buchanan's had 8, Clovis West has had 3. They were doing, when I was in high school in 83, they won it in 83, 84, and 89. And so those 3 teams, even this year at the state tournament, you look at let me see, I had the stat for this too. I was sort of curious. I think the track league, let me see, top teams took most medals. Let me see, give me a second. I have to find it on my stats. I think the track league, I got so many stats. I'm just breaking
Yeah,
down.
I'm not gonna lie, you overwhelmed me a little bit. I was like, oh, look at some brackets. And you just kept sending them. Like, dude, this is awesome. So I
Yeah,
don't.
I'm
So
gonna
I
send you more. I'm
keep
an
sending
analysis
me. Keep
guy.
sending me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the track league, if you just look at the teams that place at state and track, I'll get it to you in a second. Let me look real quick. So this year, CIF state medals, Central had 34, Southern 33. But when we go down by, let me see, placing, There it is right there, track league. So of the track league, Buchanan, Clovis, Clovis North, and Clovis West all earned medals this year. They had 21, which is 19% of the state medals just come from a few schools. Quarterfinalists, they had 24 of those track schools, semifinalists 10, and believe it or not, only 4 and made the finals. So their metric is solid just in that one league. There's no other league like that.
I mean, from top to bottom, I mean, this has not been, it's been talked about a lot. I mean, they're set up for success and they're
Yeah,
competitive.
yeah. But no, yeah, see, I got all these stats because when I was with the California, so if you want to go about, I don't know, you want to talk about the history of the
Let's
California wrestler.
let's do it. Let's do it. Talk
Okay,
about the
so
history.
the history of the California wrestler. So you wrestled in the CCS, right, in the Harbor High School, right
Mhm.
there, Santa Cruz. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the California wrestler, even back in the 1970s, there was a guy named Bill Grant. He was from Monterey. Bill run the Monterey Clinic. He's a legend in promoting California wrestling. Great coach. He's retired now. But it was in the 1970s, around 74, 75. The coaches were like, no one's promoting wrestling in the newspapers, right? This is pre-internet, Instagram and all these different things. And so Bill Grant and a guy named Larry Prosser and a few other guys got together and says, hey, let's create the Northern California Wrestler. So they were focusing on the Northern Cal. And I sent you a picture of the original
Yeah.
North. That was a newsletter, right?
That's wild.
So they did that and they put in tournament results. They were cocking the coaches. They were doing rankings. A few years later, like everything else, what about the rest of the state? So Bill's like, okay, we'll create the California wrestler. So around 77 time frame, the California wrestler, you had Bill Grant, Larry Prosper. There was a guy named Stan Jamerson who created this mega book that had all the history of the NorCal championships. Coach Bill Smith, who was the coach at Clayton Valley, he was an Olympic coach. He helped out. Vern Baxter, Larry Farrant, and Lynn Dyke. I don't know if you know Lynn Dyke.
Yeah, they used to have I want to say a tournament maybe in CCS that was named after him, I think.
Yeah. Lynn is a legend. Lynn's a Hall of Fame guy. He and Jim Root, and there's another gentleman. They're the founders of the CIF state tournament. Lynn Dyke has been one of the promoters. He was part of the Hall of Fame committee. He's retired now. That guy has given his life to it. He's what we see today as a result of guys like Lynn Dyke, Bill Grant. And then what happened, it went through the 80s. I even recall when I was in high school, back in the 80s, everyone was in a bubble. And I remember my coach bringing this little newsletter. I'm like, what's that, coach? And he's like, oh, this is the California wrestler. I'm like, rankings? I'm like, where's Clovis at? And I'm in Livermore, right? And we're
Yeah.
at the Boondocks. I go, where's Valencia? Where's I never heard of Foothill of Bakersfield. I mean, who are these schools, right? We're in a bubble, never, and you didn't know who anyone was. I'm like, who's this David Lee guy in my way? Coach is like, he's the best guy in the country. I'm like, you know, and we're in this bubble. So I remember that. And then as time goes on, I went in the Navy, I got out, went to college, I started coaching again. And we went to the Monterey Clinic. This is where I got involved. It was around the 92, 93 time frame. Went to Monterey, and my coach like, oh, this is Bill Grant. I'm like, oh, cool. They wrestled in college, San Francisco State. And I didn't get into wrestling to be a promoter or writer, right? That wasn't my
Yeah,
mindset.
it just
And
happened.
my coach like, yeah, he's the one who does California wrestling. I'm like, oh, that guy. Oh, I remember he used to show us the thing. And I went up to Bill and I go, and Bill's a nice, approachable guy. I go, hey, I know this North Coast section. If you need anything, let me know. I can help out. He goes, sure, come on board. And I go, what do you want me to do? He goes, just write an article, help with the rankings. And that's where I started. And some of my drive is that to why I took it to the level I am at today. Because currently I write for Wrestling USA, Win Magazine. I'm a contributor, right? Amateur Wrestling News. I rest California Wrestler for 25 plus years. I helped promote that. A lot of those stats you see out there, that's me and a few other guys that put all that history together. Like the brackets I
Yeah.
sent you, not many people have those. Those are only a handful of people have. I used to have them on the site, but the site's gone. But I got involved and I started pushing hard because I had a goal like I didn't achieve as an athlete. My coach told me at Chabot, he goes, you got to find a goal somewhere else. If you're going to fill that
Yeah.
thing. You
Yeah.
know, you're not going to achieve something, you're going to hurt for life, but take that pain, put it somewhere else. So when I got into promoting and writing and working with California Wrestler, one day I made the decision I'm going national. So a lot of what you see with the California Wrestler in the early days, we were trying to bring California into the national public square. Like they know the California kids. I used to do the preseason review where it was like a resume of every kid in the state. This is even in California Wrestler and the old when we came online. So we started there, and it was Michael Wright, myself. Around the new millennium, we went to Bill Grant and they go, Bill, the newsletter is obsolete. We got to go online and get our stuff there. It says we can put it on there, right? Because what we can do in one day would take us a month's worth of work doing it in a newsletter. Time is just going. So we started and moved a little slow, and then through time we had a guy help us out with the web, Rick Griffith. My brother helped out. Pablo Di Maria started coming on board.
Mm-hmm.
So and Bill and all of us were working, and then Michael Cho came on with his rankings, which in my opinion, I did rankings, Bill did. He's an AI, walking AI. There is no one in the country, in my opinion, and all the things can do rankings as good as him. He is the best in the country. And I'll just say that. There's no one like him. They're fortunate. That guy's predictability is an algorithm. Come state, if you're ranked in the top 8, you got like a 95 percentile chance of placing, right? Top
That's
12 is
wild.
like, yeah, top 8. And but the new beauty of California, so it sort of evolved there, and then it went up to 2020, and then I retire, I moved to Idaho, and it just sort of died away. But there's still guys. It's taken a new form. Like when I saw about you guys doing this podcast, I go, that's great, right? Things evolve, right? California Wrestler may not be there like it used to be, but the podcasts are becoming big. Instagram, wrestling's changing, right? The way you present it, right? It's that new generation of communication. So what you're doing is great. When I saw your podcast, I'm like, who are these guys? These guys, this is great. I want to
Just
know
some
more
dude that
about this.
likes wrestling.
Yeah,
You know?
you are, but see, the old school guys didn't want to transition into the web, right? They were
Yeah.
paper and pencil, and then we transitioned. Now this is the new transition, and that's why up here in Idaho, when I came to Idaho, um, I was just going to retire, maybe write a few things with the magazines now and then. And Mike Finn from Win Magazine called me up one day, goes, "Oh, you're in Idaho now." I said, "Yep, I'm retired." He goes, "So what's going on in Idaho?" And I go, "I don't know. I just got here." He goes, "You are going to write articles about Idaho." And I go, "I don't know. I have to figure out what I'm going to do." So I spent about 2 weeks networking, going out there, and I'm telling you, from I mean, yeah, Chris Owens, Ivan Ivanov, Miko Gorgiev, all these guys. I'm like, this is a hidden gem. It's the gem state, right? I go,
Yeah.
this is a hidden
Yeah.
gem. So I created a gem state series called the Hidden Gems Tier One. And since I've been here, I've probably written about 120 articles. I think I sent you the link of the things I'm doing.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just stopping. I haven't stopped since I got here, and so, but it's been great for me because coming from the one division California State, which I still track the whole country,
Mhm.
right? I still watch California. I still what's going on national. I mean, we've got the NCAs coming up, but being in Idaho has been a new experience for me, and I learned a lot. And the reason I've been doing a deep dive on divisions is because on our podcast in Idaho, they asked, shouldn't we go to a super state like California? And I'm like, well, be careful what you wish for. So I came back, and the only, other than New Jersey, which is a tough one division state, Indiana, and I think Hawaii and a few others, Kentucky have one division, but the elite states, I wanted to do that's why I'm doing an analysis. So when I come back and write an article in Idaho, why we should remain divisions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not
Yeah.
about,
Big time.
it's not the, I think we enjoy watching the power matches. Us wrestling junkies love that. But for the growth of the sport at the high school level, I think divisions will help more than hurt it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like there's too much data out there that proves that point. It's like this
Yep.
is going to help wrestling. And honestly, it's like there's a part of me that's maybe a little bit selfish, and maybe that's the competitive part that wants to see those matches, and we want to wrestle the best guys only. But on the other hand, and it's ironic because I came from a background where, again, I probably would be in that lower division. You know what I mean? being able to provide more opportunities for wrestlers, for people to follow goals and believe into something that's bigger than themselves. That's our job as coaches. And it's like
Mhm.
I feel like some of the big people that are pushing for to keep it one division, and maybe it's just from what I see in my perspective, they're always coaches. They're always guys that wrestled at a high level. No, we got to keep it tough. We got to keep it this meat grinder. But is that what's best for California wrestling moving forward? I
Nope.
don't think so. I think it sets us honestly, it sets us back. The elite guys, they're fine. The cream is always going to rise to the top, like you said.
Mhm.
But for everybody else, there's so much potential that is just not getting realized. And it's a
Nope.
waste.
There's
We
a
have the
lot of
highest
waste.
population. It's a waste.
Yeah, because like I was saying, the argument, well, we have less kids going to college. I looked at the ratio statistics. We're 100 high schools in Idaho, 4 divisions. In the last 2 years, we've had, I think, 21 kids, D1 alone. Yeah, I'm looking at stat. We've had 21 kids that got D1 commits. And I think California in the last 2 years, 23 and 24, has had 50. So if you look at the 850 high schools, technically, ratio wise, they should be over 170 kids. It's not going to happen, but technically, so we're overachieving in Idaho for the small number per capita, right? So the argument that it's going to hurt our kids going to college is not true. The
Yeah.
colleges know the elite kids because they're wrestling. You got Doc B. Doc B's in some weights are tougher than state.
I think honestly in almost all the ways they're tougher than the state
you
tournament.
know, when we had a kid from Idaho, Mac Mager. He won it, took third, took seventh this year. He was just a last second. He lost a kid from Gilroy. He's a
Yeah.
five-time Fargo national champ, three-time folk style national champ. Now, granted, it was in the small weights. He's starting to grow into that 125 weight group and stuff, but he's a stud. But even he was saying, wow, this is going to get me ready for Division One. So they got Doc B. Doc B is the premier chairman. So if people are worried about whether they're the best of the best, then go to Doc B
Yeah,
or
go to
find
Doc
Kevin.
B. Let that. I mean, if you look at, so I had, a couple different guys that are from the northeast, like New England,
Mhm.
and they have all these different small states like Vermont, New Hampshire, Delaware,
Mhm.
Connecticut, and what they do is you go in you go compete in your state tournament, and then depending on how competitive your state tournament is, there's allocations to move on to like a New England championship,
That's
which
right.
I think is awesome. Like
Mhm.
we could still do that in California if we really wanted to find out who the top dog is. All right, well, fine. We'll pull out the best guys from that higher level division. The best
Mhm.
guys from second and third, and let's put them in another tournament. If
Yeah,
we wanted to do that, we could do that. If
yeah.
you want to find out. But I
No.
mean, I don't know. I just feel like there's enough data out there. But the question is what do we do to actually make this a possibility?
How do you do it? One, you got to form a group of people and they have to. How did Lynn Dyke and Jim Root, and there was another gentleman, I can't his name, he was from the CCS. How did they do it? They formulated a plan. They broke it all down logistically. How would this work? Who's it going to be? They had all the stats and they presented it. And I think we got smart people in this state. I mean, we got people that do the brackets, Tom Zach. We got Larry Katz, who's a master stack. You got Michael Cho, who's an AI when it comes to statistics. We got the brain power. We got Adam Terapelli. He's sharp. He
Mhm.
knows there's enough guys here that if they sat down, they can come up with a game plan and come up with a logistical reason to do it. And it's going to benefit. It's going to give more, CIF always wants to give more opportunity and more stuff. Um, and it would probably, I think it'd happen. They just have to have people to sit down and figure out how they would do it and what way and come up with the logistics and
Do
do
you?
it.
I mean, you I think have interacted with those people more than I have. Do you feel like they're going to want to do something like that?
They're still the ones that want to keep it. So there's been surveys before, but I'm not sure those surveys really were a cross section of every coach in the
Yeah.
state. I really don't think so. I think there was a handful, there was a sample done of the whole state and it represented. But I think the time, if they look at the numbers and they see what's happening, where 2% of the state is dominating a vast majority of the medals, I mean, just look at it, 21% of the medals came from the top two teams.
Dang. Yeah.
Two teams out of 850 high schools. Basically, there was 200. By the time it got to state, there was 235 schools represented out of that 850 sections. The masters, there was just 699. So almost everyone in the state made it to. Someone had a rep all the way up to the masters, other than maybe 100 something high schools, right? So mass majority. How many of those guys in the divisions that barely qualified for state would place in a division and get a little more success? I think it would make more money at the Mechanic Center in Bakersfield. Keep
See, it's
saying
hard. It takes
it's
time
hard. I
to.
can't. What was it like? Yeah, they keep changing the name there, but yeah, I think it's possible. But I think the only way you can go in there was with all the data and the comprehensive to talk. The argument, right? Why?
Yeah.
First, you have to do it. Why do we want to do? Is it to highlight the mega elite, which is great. I love watching that. I mean, you watch the Big Ten championships, and I'm
Mhm.
not going to mention any other colleges in division. You watch that, and you watch the other ones. It's not the same, right? The Big Ten is elite. So you may not have that, but I think at the end of the day, you're still going to have great wrestling throughout at the state tournament. A vast majority of those kids in the divisions, a lot of them would already be going to state regardless, but you still have, another layer that would have a better opportunity of getting a medal at state. And they may stick around longer, some of them, right? And
Yeah.
I
And
think it's about
that should
growth of
be
the.
our, yeah, retaining kids. I mean, that's all the way through. It's interesting. I was at this youth practice, and our doors are open because it's springtime and it's getting nice in Bakersfield, and the time just changed, so it's still daylight out, and there's a baseball game going on. So like
Mhm.
as we're having this youth practice, kids are coming to watch the baseball game, and they're like poking their heads in, like, what the heck is going on in there? Like there's kids,
Mhm.
running and sprinting and doing push-ups and wrestling hard. And I go out and I talk to one of the dads, and he's in baseball attire, and he's like, "Hey, do you know who Josh Kim is?" And I'm like, "Where do you wrestle at?" Harvard. I'm like, and I bring up Slavakowski, the guy that transferred to Rutgers. I'm like, "Oh, do you know who that is?" He goes, "Yeah, the guy that transferred to Rutgers." And all of a sudden, we start talking about like Penn State, and we talk about nationals. I'm like, "Who is this guy?" I have no idea who this guy is. He's like, "Oh, I used to wrestle back in high school down south." And he still adamantly watches wrestling. I'm like, how come you're not like coaching in some way? Why are you at a baseball game? How come you're
Mhm.
not like, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
and maybe if it was something to where if he placed at the state tournament, maybe he would still be around giving back to the community. And again, that little bit of winning sometimes helps.
Yeah, and how many coaches out there weren't high level wrestlers but end up being the best coaches? I mean, one of my coaches at Chabot College, Zach Papachristos, who encouraged me to get into promoting wrestling way back in the day. Um, that guy never wrestled in his life, but he had the gift. And the other coach was Steve Sroy, who was an awesome wrestler, sambo fighter. Zach was one of those coaches that he knew how to communicate, how to motivate.
Yeah.
Greg Chappell, I wrestled, coached with at Liberty. He had successful teams. He went to Fresno State, but he wasn't winning the NCAA. But awesome coach. They just know these guys had that desire. What they didn't get as a wrestler, they put in to as a coach. And there's still a lot of guys out there that could be great coaches, right? They still have
Yeah.
that energy, that loss, like, okay, I still want to give something. And they have the gift of the gab. And a lot of coaches back in the day, we had a lot of guys like that. They were just passionate people that were really good at coaching. They may not have been NCAA champs, but they were great coaches, you know?
Yeah. And I think those coaching clinics, right? Like I never attended the Monterey coaching clinic, but that would have been something cool to go do.
Oh,
I mean, I don't. To be honest, I'm not even sure if it's not still around anymore, is
no,
it?
okay. So I
I know
helped.
Roberto Dixon was doing it for a little bit, right?
Yeah, he did some of the clinics. So Bill Grant
Okay.
started that in 1976 because he wanted his kids to have the opportunity to see coaches from other areas, and they had clinics. Then it became a coaches clinic too. I started helping Bill and his wife and them run the clinic from the late 90s all the way up to 2019 was the last one we did. And we've had Dan Gable, Kenny Monday, Rulon Gardner, Bella Glossop. We have had almost everyone you can think of come to that clinic, and it was one of the it brought camaraderie. You would have enjoyed it as a coach. I know you would want to come. Every coach, we had Burrows and
Yeah.
Cale Sanderson there. Everyone's been there, some of the top college coaches in the country. And that's what Bill did, is brought these guys together. And Bill, that was the whole goal of the California Wrestler back then. We wanted to create connectivity throughout the state. When I started helping, I want to create connectivity throughout the country, even with the Idaho. When I came into Idaho, that's like this hidden gem, like no one's talking about on a national stage. I start writing stuff and promoting. Now I'm integrating that knowledge into the public square nationally. And if you read some of my hidden gems, you're like, wow, these people are like, I didn't know that kid did all this, right? And you start creating connectivity, and that's what I'm trying to do in Idaho, is to create that. I like doing this podcast, right? We're trying to
Yeah.
create connect. That's the power of the podcast. We can just talk out issues, and I think the more we talk about it, it's like the more we can create more things happening just by just having that conversation.
Yeah, putting it out, like you said, in kind of the public square,
Yeah.
right? I think it's interesting how you retired out in Idaho, and it's almost like, was it, oh man, Godfather 3, where he's like, as soon as I'm out, they pull me back in.
They
Like you
sucked me
got pulled
back
back
in.
in.
That's
Yeah, you got
exactly.
pulled back in.
That was funny because I told someone that. I said, just when I thought I was going to take a break, they sucked me back in, man. And it's
Got
like,
him.
and I stop. I mean, once I get my mind going, I got a goal. And I said, my goal is to bring Idaho. Once I realized Idaho was this gem, right? For the small state it is, I'm like, my God. And they went the first year, I think it was 21. I wrote my first article with Tier with the Idaho Elite Report when I started. And I'm like, Idaho has a group of kids that can challenge for the Fargo title. If not, they'll be in the top three. That year they had a record, and all the people I write to, and they're like, "Oh yeah, really? Yeah, 24 All-Americans that year." And I'm like, I thought I was seeing that, right? I was nervous, right? And yeah, we don't have the depth of a California because of the numbers, but the quality's good. And yeah, I got sucked back in, and I don't know when I'm going to stop. But I
Man,
just
I
I
have
just love.
another I have an Idaho question for you.
Sure,
I'm sorry if I cut you off just for a second.
that's okay.
Boise State. So when I wrestled at Cal State Bakersfield, I wrestled for 2 years for Riley Orozco and Mike Mendoza.
I know
Um,
Riley.
and yeah, so I actually texted him like, "Hey, do you know Alfontes?" He's like, "Yeah, I mean, I don't know him super well, but I know him." I'm like, "All
Yeah,
right, well, I'm having him on tonight." He's like, "Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome." But both those guys, great dudes. It was I was happy for them that they went, and because I knew the kind of work that they were putting at Cal State Bakersfield, and I was happy for them. I was disappointed that they left. I was happy for them that they went to Boise, and then they freaking cut the program.
yep,
Like it's the only Division One school in the state. Now there are other programs that are there, and there's a
one.
lot of really good programs that are surrounding Idaho, right? And I think Adam Hall, okay, is a
Oh yeah.
Boise State guy going to Utah Valley after this season. I think is great, and hopefully has those connections in Idaho.
Oh,
But
it's those strong connections. Trust me, we're already talking to him.
yeah, I mean, but it's like I don't know. Is that something that is there any kind of movement? Is there any kind of headway into getting some kind of higher level wrestling
Yes,
happening
yeah,
back
there's
in Idaho?
okay, so yeah, when I came here, I remember they dropped it in 2017. I was living in the Bay Area, and I remember being very disappointed. Like, how can they drop a program that was in the top 10? And back then, the AD wanted a baseball team. They dropped it. They were
Yeah,
producing good
drama.
teams there. In fact, the wealth of college coaches in the whole Treasure Valley and throughout the state are from the Boise State. Levi Jones, you have Chris Owens that was a coach there from Oklahoma State. Adam Hall, right?
Hmm.
He came from Boise State. They were producing great guys. They dropped it. There was an effort early. Then when COVID hit, it sort of stopped. But one of the things as a writer is I'm pushing for the concept of we got to bring this program back. So
Yeah,
if you go read all my articles, it's basically writing a story about what's going on in Idaho. So if there's any question of whether we should, the way I equate it, when you got 24 all when you went into Fargo or folk style nationals, junior folk style nationals, 3 years in a row, Idaho has won the folk style nationals. You win Fargo nationals, you're in the top three in freestyle, right? And you're producing that. And you got 21 kids going to Division One. That would be like going to Michigan and having great high school hockey players, but they don't have a Division I team there. It's the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
It's like, this is
And
insane.
Michigan
So
hockey is dominant. It's
exactly,
dominant
it'd
at
be like,
Division I level.
yeah. So we got North Idaho. Derek Booth is an
Mhm.
alumni of North Idaho. He was coaching out of state. He came back. He's already bringing the North Idaho program back up. Going to start billing. I know Adam Hall. I talked to him a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to do an article with him, and we were talking. He's coming. That's a gem coming back because he's
Yeah.
within close proximity. And trust me, it's he might as well be in Idaho, being right that close. So yeah, we're gonna we'll have a pipeline there. Um, if you look at our state, the states that are taking most of our kids is Oregon, Montana, Utah,
Wyoming at all?
Wyoming. Yeah,
Yeah.
Wyoming. So a lot of those schools see, I keep in contact. Now we got Humboldt State coming back. I was
Yeah.
just, I
Lenny
was talking to,
Zaleski.
I was talking to Lenny Zaleski. I'm like, hey, brother, it's good that you're back because we got all these Idaho kids. So I interact with a lot of, even Jim Zaleski. He's up
Mhm.
at Jamestown.
Jamestown.
I'm in contact. That's one thing as a writer and promoter, and I also coach at Rocky Mountain High School, so I'm still coaching, helping out.
There you
And I'll see,
go.
yeah, I see a Roscoe now and then. I think he was helping with Meridian,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to create connectivity and just bringing the light, what's going on, and keep in contact with Mitchell at Grandview. There, I'm trying to bring this connectivity with what's going on in Idaho. I did the same thing in California. You know, these podcasts help, articles come out. It's just all about promoting the kids in the sport.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have to, I learned that's why 30 years ago I said, we can't depend on the newspapers. We got to do it. Right. And Bill Grant and Lynn Dyke and all those guys were doing a great job. And as time went on, we were just promoting. I mean, when I was with the California Wrestler the last 4 years, I probably content what I put in 1 week, I'd spend 30 hours a week on top of my regular job, updating the website, putting content.
Yeah.
Michael Wright's doing he's doing the forum. Pablo was Di Maria was helping out. All these guys were doing stuff in content. I'm doing all the history. I got tons of
Yeah.
stuff I can send you. And I don't, it's not doing me any good. When the California Wrestler site came down, I know they have it on Facebook. Michael's still doing an awesome job. But the California Wrestler itself, where every day we had content going on there, that's ended. Maybe someday someone will take it. But I got all
Well,
the
I mean, so what happened? Because so I know it was kind of going down, and I think Daniel Cormier, I think maybe saved it initially, and then
I don't
I
know
I
that
go
detail. I was gone by then.
so I'm literally I'm trying to look at the rankings because they just got updated, and I'm trying to look at potential kids who might have to wrestle in the postseason and see what happened with the results. And I'm trying to find it, and the dang website's down. I'm like, what the heck? So I go on the California forum. I'm texting my buddies. You guys know where it's at? And it's on a separate site.
I
What?
think we had a guy named Ray Brinzer, and he was helping us, and he had it on his server, and I left. I was already gone, and it was still up, and then it dropped. I think something happened where it just the server went down, lost everything. Everything was gone. Every historical. But the good news is I kept every bit of data. So I got all the data. I got all the brackets. I got all the history of NH. I got every California's placed at the NC. I got all that data.
I mean,
It's in my
do we have
treasure
a web?
chest.
Can we put it on a website
That's what I'm
somewhere?
saying. That's why it's great because it's not my information, it's our information, right? I just the guy that compiled all that stuff and I don't want it to go away. That's why I kept everything in a
Yeah.
folder, right? Someday I'm gonna have to share this. So I shared the brackets with you. I saw your thing is like we got to get that stuff out there. So let me go through all my documents and I can send you. It may not be updated like up to 2024, but it'll be up in the 2020, like Division I All-Americans, Division II, Division III.
Yeah.
And I got all that. I got
Well,
the whole history.
I mean, are you like we could talk about this obviously later, but are you like if Cali Wrestling, my buddy Daniel McCune just has this website. I'm not I still have to talk to him about it, but I think he would be down to put up that information. That
It's
needs to
not
be
my,
Yeah, I know the information, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like that needs to be up somewhere. Like
it does
so we
need
can
to
go
be
back and
somewhere.
look at it.
Yeah, to me, it's not, when I compile all this stuff, yeah, I did the work, right? but it's
Yeah.
not, it's our information, right? I'm just a historian. I don't want it, I want it
You're
to
the
get out
historian,
there.
man.
I did it when that before I left, I took everything from that site just in case, right? And
Man.
not that I was thinking it was going to get shut down, but just in case I wanted
Yeah,
to
you
have,
never know.
you never know. I wanted to have it and I have it on a zip drive. And it's like, yeah, so I can send you stuff. You may have to update some of the stuff, but I got all the history, all the NorCal, SoCal, I got all that stuff. The
Because
history.
yeah, I mean, it's just cool, like going back and looking at it, and it's also celebrating all those people that did the work, that was at these tournaments, that competed, that went off and wrestled in college. It's like we got to know our history.
I
Got to
did
know our
all the
history.
history, bro.
You know, I'm a history teacher, right?
No.
Yeah, I'm a history teacher.
Yeah. And
So it's like,
I compiled all that history. I did all, and I'm doing it in Idaho. I'm doing a deep dive in Idaho. No one
let's
has any of the
go.
history. So it's like for me to learn the sport in the state, I got to study everything, right? I'm
Mhm.
going through these statistics. The more I put everything together, the more I'm learning, right? So, but yeah, I can send you all that stuff. Share it with the masses. I still share. People ask, "Hey, you got the brackets? Here you go. Get them out there." It's not mine. I mean, it's the state's history. I don't want it to get lost.
Yeah, and I think it's like what you said. We got to get that information out. It needs to be accessible, and the people need to be. It's like there's not any libraries. Like
Oh,
that's ridiculous. How is
yeah,
there not a library where we can go access this information?
yeah. It was there, but it disappeared.
Man. Well, I
Yeah.
think I think obviously it's frustrating, but I think what you said earlier, like the spirit of the California wrestler, is just taken different shapes. Like there's all these
Hmm.
different websites. Like Cal Grappler does a good job, I think, with stats
Hmm.
and articles. Michael Cho is doing a great job still with the rankings.
A lot of that stuff
Um,
on the Cal Grappler, he took my information and put it on his site. So a lot of that history on there, yeah, he used it. I'm like, yeah, take it, put it on there, right there. That's when I was doing all that stuff. A lot of that stuff's my stuff that I put together. And it was just like
yeah,
it's public square, right? It's not like I have some patent on it, right? This is just information. It's not for me, it's for the state, right? It's for the history. So if people want copies here, put it out there. It's just my passion, what I do to put it together, right? It's like writing music. Okay, I wrote the music, go play it, right? I mean, it's the same thing. So yeah, people have used it before and I still have it, and we got to get it out there again because it is a rich history. When you start looking back, I got NAIA All-Americans, all of them, dating back to the 60s, Division II, all that stuff.
have you ever thought about like so like Mike Stricker?
I know Mike real well. Doing a book?
Yeah, he's done. I have both of his books. I think I lost one by accident. I need to get another copy, but
Yeah, he sent me a recent
especially
copy.
for like looking at Frontiers history, it's like I like going back to 2006 and trying to figure out all of our league champs, all of our Valley champs, guys that qualified. Like I can go back and look at those old league tournaments because I want to put together our own Frontier history and be able to keep track of these people and hit them up and talk to
I
them.
was I was going to do a book, but then I retired and moved to Idaho. So
Well,
that's
yeah, but you're still writing, Al.
I
Like
know, I
you're
know,
still
but
doing it.
I helped my college coach write his memoir book called Papa Christos, one of the legend coaches from Chabot. I just did that. I'm doing all this stuff in Idaho. Now I'm caught up in this. I'm going to write an article about divisions. So yeah, it's yeah, I may do some. Bill Grant and I talked about that, doing that someday, but like time happened and
Yeah.
COVID happened. I moved on. So it's something that's on my back burner. But Mike Stricker's done a great job of preserving that history, in the
I was
seats.
I was in a Zoom meeting with them. It was some like CCB alumni Zoom meeting that happened during COVID. And Stricker is hilarious. And I've only seen him like at like fundraisers and stuff like before, and I'd shake his hand and like talk to him. I didn't realize how funny he is.
Oh, he's a good guy. I love
We
Mike.
I was at the Jockey Club Awards, and I was like, "Oh, that's Mike." I'm like, "Hi, Mike Stricker. Nice to meet you. Like, I wrestle at Cal State." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I remember you." And then just like we were like he'd known me forever, just starts launching in and talking about all these different people and like his thoughts on them. And I'm like,
Oh, he's a good old
"Whoa,
boy. Well,
yeah, yeah,
I was on the Hall of Fame committee with Mike, and we sat together a lot, and he'd just tell me a lot of great stories. Yeah, I wrestled his son back in the 80s in JC, his oldest son. Yeah, he's been around, he's been here a long time. But talking about Frontier, uh, when COVID happened, one of the young schoolboy kids that was going to be in that next generation of Jason Mara
Mhm.
from Bakersfield. He lives in my area. He ended up winning 4 state titles here.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
him and Miguel Estrada, and there's another kid, Bryson Tablet.
right.
And there's a long list of other kids. They all wrestled for Elite Force initially.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
so he lives close to me. Yeah, he won 4 state titles here, and
that's
he
pretty
beat
cool.
Parco at Reno. So can you imagine if he was in California still?
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, it would be interesting if he was at Frontier and we had, all those other kids that went off and did, other things. But I don't know. I don't know him super well.
nice kid going to
But
Stanford. Smart
yeah,
kid, solid, good
yeah, he seems like
family.
a nice kid.
Yeah, down to earth. You wouldn't think of him as a wrestler. Another Cal State Bakersfield alumni is in Idaho now helping coach. Rich Bailey.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I've talked
Rich.
to him a couple times.
Yeah, we were just watching the Big Tens this weekend, but he's living here now and he's helping out at Meridian High School. That's where I've seen Orozco a few times at state tournament. He's firefighter right up here in the
Yeah,
Boise area.
yeah. Bailey's son wrestles for Lehigh, maybe
Yep,
at
Carter.
33s. Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing fairly well. I don't know if he may. He's right there in the 1-2.
Boy, he's behind somebody that's pretty tough.
I know.
But
Yeah,
it's
and
okay. It happens.
I don't know if you remember him. He might have graduated before you. Remember Carl Bergstead from Paradise? He was a state champion or state finalist for
Big was
Paradise
it
High School.
bigger? Was it a bigger weight?
Yeah, like 190s Ryan Bergstead.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's up here in Idaho. He's living in the Nampa area, coaching at Ridgeview High School. I ran into
Okay.
him. So we got some California transplants up here.
Yeah.
People moving up here and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, COVID and well, yeah, I don't know. I sometimes get into some controversial stuff on here, but I don't want to run my mouth too
No,
much.
we
So
don't
I'll
have to
just leave it
talk
at that.
about it. At the end of the day, whatever side we're on, we're all together in wrestling. I mean, I've been
Yeah.
all over the world. I've traveled. Even when I was in Russia, my wife and I we adopted our daughter when she was an infant, so we had to go to Krasnoyar, Siberia, of all places. And my wife's like, "Oh, we're going to Siberia. Let me guess, you're going to run into a wrestler there because everywhere I go, I run into a wrestler, right?
Yeah.
You see their ears, or you see they have that." And I go, probably. I go, they train Olympians there.
Well, Yarrigan is there, or
Yeah,
what I think it
I've
was
been
there.
to Urigan. We went right
Yeah.
over the Yenesi River and
Yeah.
the Urigan Center. But our second trip, the day we got there, the next day we have to go to court to finalize the adoption and go see the judge and get it all finalized. And it's nice weather at the time. And we're jet lagged, we're sleeping, we get in early. We wake up, it's around 12 o'clock, and it's 15-hour different time. And I'm all like, whoa, what's going on? I look outside, there's like thousands of people outside the hotel, and there's this festival going on. And I'm like, I'm gonna go check it out. So I got my flip-flops, shorts, I got a wrestling shirt on,
There you
right?
go.
Walking around, and I got my camera. I said, let me go take some picture of all people. I'm walking, I'm looking in the crowd, I'm watching the music and kids dance. It's a children's festival. And I'm like, man, that's a bunch of wrestlers right there. So I walk up and it was Boozavar Saitiev, Adam Saitiev. Like half the team that was
The
training.
legends.
Oh, yeah. So I got to talk to Saitiev and I'm like, I walk up to him. I'm like, Privyet. And he looks at me and he's like, who's this guy? And
Yeah.
and I said a little bit of Russian to him, and I go, "You're Boozavar Saitiev," and he's like, "How do you know my name?" I'm like, "Brother, I know who you." I mean, it's like we know who you are. You're the best in the world, right? You've won
Yeah.
8 world titles at the time. It was pretty cool. But everyone, even when we went to go see the judge, she asked us when we were doing the thing for our court, what do you have in common with the Russian people? Don't make something up. I said, I'm a wrestler. I know all these wrestlers from Russia. And she's like looking at me, and I know Boozavar Saitiev. And she's like, you know Boozavar Saitiev? And I'm like, yeah, we're all friends, man. We're all wrestling. And she goes, he's the greatest. He's a folk hero there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, posters of him. Everyone knows who Saitiev is. It'd be like Michael Jordan walking around. And
Yeah.
that guy is up on the pedestal over there in Siberia.
Well, it's crazy how much, like, how knowledgeable the Russian people are about not just Russian wrestlers, but American wrestlers.
Oh
Like
yeah.
watching that Flow film where they went to might have been the Yarrigan. But they brought, like, like Kyle Snyder was there and Jake Farner was there, and all these little Russian kids are coming up trying to get autographs. Like they know exactly who he is and they want to get his
Oh,
autograph. Didn't matter if he was American or whatever.
they
And
know.
it's yeah, I mean, that's awesome. It's like,
Dude,
honestly, it's like you think what can bring people together. It's sport.
oh,
It's
it's
sport,
sport.
big time.
I mean, it was like of all people, and I got a photo with them because I knew when I came home, I said, I ran in and say, yeah, right.
People are gonna believe you.
No, they
Yeah,
do.
just
It's
at a
like there's
random
people are saying,
festival.
of all guys, 9-time world champion, everyone, even our interpreter, the judge, everyone's like, CTF, and he's a legend here. He drives a Mercedes. They treat him like royalty. They got posters everywhere of him. The Jurgen Center had a big poster, CTF. I mean, it was surreal being there. Yeah.
Man,
So
out of all, that's such a crazy story. Like, if you didn't have a picture of it, no one would believe you. It's like you're
no
not
one to
even
believe.
there. If you were maybe at a wrestling tournament, like maybe, but it's like you're there to, adopt somebody. Like you go over to this other country, you're jet lagged, you come out of the hotel, boom, you see the
There's
Satias.
Adam Saitiev, Buzavar, and there was a handful of other guys that were training. The training center was just around the corner from our hotel, right, where they trained the things, and they were just hanging out. And the thing about Saitiev, other than looking at his ears, if you look at him physically, he looked weak,
Yeah.
skinny. It's like he didn't look like much, but that dude's he's a legend, one of the best ever to ever hit the mat,
Well,
right?
sometimes those skinny, scrawny guys are actually pretty tough.
Oh yeah, he's
I,
a stud.
my first day in Cal State's practice, they put me with Bryce Hammond,
Oh
and
yeah,
I had, I knew who he was, and I was like, oh man, I get to wrestle with a returning All American, and he's actually a super, like, nice dude, and
yep.
like he's kind of let me work too, and like I'm like all excited, I'm like, all right, time to go live, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go live with Bryce Hammond. I was on my back the whole go, like
Oh,
pretty much, like
he was the
put the
real
legs
deal in
in,
high school.
powered half me. Yeah, and wrestling him, and I wrestled with Coleman a lot too. Those guys have the hairiest arms, and let me tell you, when they rip a
Yeah,
crossface on you,
yeah.
this is gonna sound gross, but I get off the mat, I'm pulling hairs out right now.
Their dad was a good wrestler too. He wrestled, I think, at Rio Honda, was a JC state champion.
Yeah, I
Dude,
I I, I mess with Ray every time I see him. So
yeah,
he had this surgery on his throat, so he talks like this right now.
yeah,
So whenever I see him, like, "What's up, Ray?" And he's like, "Oh, you suck," like stuff
yeah.
like that. But great family,
Oh
great
yeah,
family.
I know
Yeah,
Ray. They're all good people. I used to network and I got to know him real well. But no, this is good, man. I'm enjoying this. This is what it's about, network. And like I said, when I saw the podcast, I asked Pablo a few, what's this simple, man? What's this podcast? This is pretty, these guys know wrestling, man. It's good to see that the content and the discussions going, because I think even if I stayed in California, um, I think the next step was to go into more podcasting, right? Even in Idaho, I'm podcasting with Idaho Sports. It's
mhm,
live though. Live is weird, right? You're just like, okay, well, I got to be careful, right? It's
yeah,
live. Um, but someday I may want to have my own podcast or a group of
yeah,
guys, just do it. And just, writing's a lot of work. When I write an article, it's a 2 week I mean, it's a long process because I'm trying to really do my homework when I write, but here it's just fluid. You just talk wrestling. I was watching you guys talking about the state tournament. You guys were on 106, and it's like, man, I still got an hour to go.
yeah. Those sons of gun. I mean, so here's the thing. Like, I mean, even right now, I'm like, crap. It's already been an hour and a half. My fiance, like, I want to make sure I protect that time. But
Yeah.
when we did that podcast, she was like, I thought you were only going to be like an hour and a half. And I'm like, I just don't know what happened. it just
Yeah,
it
we're
just happened.
yeah, we
It,
just
took-
go
it
off
took
on the
almost three
zone.
hours.
Yeah.
But this is so much fun. Al, I know you said down the line maybe you want to do your own podcast, but you're always welcome to come on. If we ever get guests, like, I'd love to get Adam Hall on. I texted with Riley, like, I want to get him on, Mike Mendoza, all those guys. If you ever want to come on and talk, I mean, it doesn't matter who it is. I'll just let you know, and you're happy to pop on.
Yeah, I know Adam Hall. In fact, I just talked to him a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to do I do the Hidden Gems series of Hidden Gems about a kid who no one really knows about, talks
Mhm.
about their resume. Tier one is like the kid going D1, but I do a Matt Chat series for I did one with Rosh Holtz, Ridge Lovett. These are past former
Awesome.
wrestlers that I'm like, what are you doing today? So the
Yeah.
kids connect to that Rosh Holtz who's living in Oklahoma right now, that he was, a stud. So I'm gonna do an article with and I'll mention that to him,
Yeah.
that because Utah Valley, it's we're in that region. This is Western region, and I think he's going to do a great job. I
Yeah.
know they just hired what's his name, uh, uh, the kid the coach that was at Oklahoma State. Um,
Esposito.
Esposito is going to North Carolina now. He's the
Oh,
new,
really?
yeah. He just got
NC
the
State.
position. Yep. So where
Dang.
Adams coming here, he's coming in there. So it's causing this chain reaction. So I don't know who. I know Hall's going to come in. He's very systematic, very. I think a lot what happened with Papaliza and those teams, he's a big factor with what you saw at North Carolina. He played a big role there. And I
Yeah.
know he's going to come here and he's going to do a good job. The question is who's going to be his assistants. I think you're going to start seeing chain reactions going on. That's going to be a good.
That's always fun. After the college tournament, to seeing that coaching carousel.
Yeah.
Especially what happened last year with like Coleman Scott leaving UNC, and then Rob Cole is like, I love North Carolina. I'm gonna go back from there, and then Stanford was like, dang, the program got dropped, and they have Rob Cole. I don't know if this is good. And then they got Chris Ayers, and Chris
Great.
Ayers is the man. I love Chris Ayers.
Chris Ayers is a good guy, great coach. So yeah, and then so the chain reactions happening. So the question is who's going to be his assistants? I know there's some good guys out there. I'm sure he's going to pick some good assists. I know things are going to change. They've had a couple All-Americans. The
Yeah,
coaches there have done a fairly good job, but I think the potential is great there.
especially with that pipeline from Idaho.
Yeah. We have 21 kids going division. We got couple kids going to Oregon State, Missouri, Princeton.
Yeah,
You know, uh, we had two of the best heavyweights in the country, the finalists at Fargo. One's at
mhm.
Oregon State, one's going to North. Shiloh Jones and Aiden Atau, who's third in the world. We had three juniors placed at the Pan American Games. Um, Jaden Skellinger's going to Lehigh. Jaden's a California kid. They moved here 10 something years ago, and he wrestled for Ivan Ivanov in the Greco, but he's going to Lehigh Valley, Lehigh. There's a lot of good kids that
Yeah,
could have stayed local with the right coaching.
yeah, for sure.
So we'll see. Now there's some good things, a lot of good things, and this is just good discussions. But I'm not one to say they have to go to divisions. I just think the conversation needs to happen. When you look at the numbers, you realize that really at the end of the day, only 1.2% up to 1 point something percent actually go on and compete in college. What about the 98%? Why don't we give them more opportunity, maybe get more kids to stick around longer?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like I like looking at Pennsylvania. I think the reason they're so good is because I mean, they have obviously a lot of college programs, not the most Division ones, but they have a lot of college programs. And these guys, they go and they stay local. They go to Drexel, they go to Penn State, they go to Penn, they go to all these places, and then they stick around. They come back and they go back to their high schools and they continue to coach. And you don't really see. I mean, you see a lot of elite kids and a lot of elite programs, but I don't think you see it those like concentration where it's like what you said, 17 schools are in the top 5 every single year. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's a little bit more spread out than that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Pennsylvania, because if you look at college right now, Pennsylvania is number one. Illinois, New Jersey, California is number 4 as far as most All-Americans in the last couple of years. As far as champions, I think California is number 4. We're in the top 5. I don't think that would change. I don't think
No,
that would change at the
I think
collegiate.
it would only improve,
It only improved.
honestly, because
Yeah.
those hidden gems that are in California,
There's a lot of
right?
hidden gems. There's a lot of them. I mean, I started looking around like, how come they're not talking about this kid? And he's placing at Fargo, right? So it's like we need, like you said, the newspapers, we're waiting for them. It's not going to get done. Like if you look at all my work that's found there, it's very detailed. You can break it down. It's like it take you 2 days, 3 days to absorb all the information. I mean, when I started promoting California, I'd have a preseason review. And that's why it was great when we went to the web. I'd have up to 100 pages of all the top returning kids in California. placed at Fargo, Folkstyle, 5 counties. I had a resume of every kid. This is in the early days. And Bill's like, you know how much it's going to cost me to go to Kinko's to make all, it's going to be 50 pages of thing. It's good. But on the internet, we can put it on there, right? And I used to
Yeah.
distribute that information to the college coaches. And when we used to go to NHSCA, used to be the top 2 kids from each state. And we're
Mhm.
like, hey, California is one division. We got guys taking fifth that can win it.
Oh,
And they let us in.
What's happening with your Zoom? You had a thumb coming up. All of a sudden,
Oh,
just all these balloons coming up. Is it your birthday?
oh no, I might have hit a button or something. Yeah.
I was like, what's happening?
Yeah.
I'm
My
sorry. I
50.
was like trying to listen to what you're saying. And the thumb I kind of ignored, but now it's just all these balloons. Did
Oh,
you
well,
see what
that's
I'm talking
weird.
about?
No, no, that's a
Oh, man.
no. Yeah, my 59th birthday is coming in October. I'll be 59. So,
Dang.
but no, it was creating connectivity. It's like California kids weren't really back then. It was like if you look at all the national magazine, it was Pennsylvania, Oklahoma. It's like, hey, we got these kids back here. So me and Bill Grant used to promote to get the best kids back to the NHSC. Every year we're in the top 3. And then we're like, we send the top 3 and he placed. Then we're like, hey, we got this kid take 5th stud. He placed. Then they're like, just send your top 8. And we were having guys, and they're like, that kid took 7th in your state. So we had a guy who was he was Rivera, Manny Rivera,
Hmm.
right? He was the Cal
Yeah.
State Bakersfield coach. He took 3rd in California. No one recruited him, wasn't getting highly recruited. Went
Yeah.
back to NHSCA, made the finals, and beat the number 1 or 2 kid in the country. And then, Minnesota recruits him, Jay Robinson. He
Hmm.
becomes an All American, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's one example is we got to create more opportunity for these kids to grow. They may not be the best of the best, but they're good enough when you don't want to lose them, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what if you have a bunch of kids placed in the 3A and they're like, you know what? I'm gonna go to NAI. I'm liking this. I got a little success. Because unless you leave the state, you don't see the difference, right?
It's a bubble.
Um,
You create a little
it's a
bubble.
bubble.
And you see
Yeah.
that with some
And
college programs too, you know,
mhm, yeah.
like Oklahoma State. It's like honestly, I think bringing Coleman Scott in after having that experience, being out kind of on his own, I think is the best thing for that program. And look, I mean, not all of them, I'm sure, is just him, but look at the jumps that they made from even last year to this year.
He brought in an energy. He still got the youth. I mean, John's my age. He'll be 60 in the next year or so, right? And he's been
Yeah,
doing it for 35 years and he's done a
that's
great
a long
job.
time.
But it gets a point where you need that young youth to come in and come in and bring that energy in, right? And things have changed. Not saying that he doesn't have energy, but it's like there comes a point you got to have a successor and let that next generation come in and bring it in. Adam Hall is that next generation, right? He waited 8 years before he became a head coach. I mean, he went to Columbia, then he's been at North Carolina for like seven plus years, and the time is right. And I think he's going to do a good job. I think Coleman Scott is going to, if he gets that. I mean, he didn't leave that top position to go to Oklahoma without that possibility. I mean, it's hard to believe that, right?
You gotta, I mean,
Yeah, we're only
I know.
guessing.
I think he interviews like I'm not even thinking about that, but
Yeah,
that has to have been part of the conversation.
yeah,
Here's the keys.
yeah,
Here's the keys to the kingdom.
yeah. Because John's been doing it for 35 years. He's won multiple child legend coach, legend wrestler, but his days are coming, to the point where he's
His
probably ready to move on.
his son Sam, I think, is a freshman, maybe a true freshman.
Yeah, I think so.
So it's
It's
maybe
hard to
for 4 or
say.
5 more years, and we'll see what happens after.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. I mean, Lenny Zaleski coming back to Humboldt. I was talking to several months ago, and he's enjoying retirement. I'm like, okay, he's done. His brother's still coaching, and I knew Humboldt was looking to bring the program back. And I get this thing coming across the board, and I'm like, Lenny's back. I'm like, damn, okay, here he goes, right?
Another guy that's retired that's just like, I guess he couldn't stay retired. He's like,
Yeah,
here's an
Ken Stabler.
opportunity to help build wrestling. And he's done it. Like he did at UC Davis. He did at CBU. When we actually took a bunch of kids down to go watch them wrestle Iowa, and that was awesome. But he's right there. He's supporting it. He's building it. Now,
Yeah.
hopefully, he can go do that at Humboldt too.
Yeah, and look, he prepared Derek Moore. Derek Moore is going to do a great job. They got a couple guys. They got some guys going to the NCAs now. They got to the Big 12.
Mhm.
He's putting his. You look what Derek's doing. He's wrestling the best schools because he's showing his kids what the best is.
Yeah.
Give them that conceptualization, that feel, what it looks like, what it feels like. It's like, okay, we won some tight matches with a little more work. We can start building. Heck, the kid from Penn State was on that team, the
Yeah,
65
Messenbrink.
pounder, right?
Well, I mean, they do a great job recruiting. Like Eric Morrow is a great recruiter, and like
Mm-hmm.
Messenbrink, dang, and there was somebody else I'm blanking on. But again, like they've had some great recruits. Like, and
Yeah.
they're not just from California; they're from all over. I think Eli Griffin, I think, is from somewhere in Oklahoma, not Tuttle,
Yeah, I'm
maybe
not
Tulsa.
sure. I'd have to look it up. But no, it's no. But now Derek's coaching. Now he's that next generation. Hopefully Lenny, it's Division II. Humboldt was been dropped for 30 years. I remember when they dropped him, like, whoa, and now it's coming back. They brought back the program up north there. It's Redwood College of Redwoods came
Mhm.
back, and that was a program. When I wrestled in JC, they may have dropped a few years before that. They brought that back, so it's good to see them bring them back. And if we have more kids wrestling in place in the state, maybe we can fill some more of these JC programs,
Yeah,
and build on that too. It'd be nice to, instead of having 22 to have 32,
yeah,
right? We just gotta look at what's good for the sport. Granted, we love to watch those power matches. I mean, I took pride in that, man. It's like, yeah, California is unique, but when you look at the bigger picture and what you're trying to do, is it for the power matches or are you trying to build a sport? It's like, what do you want to do?
yeah,
And I think that conversation should happen. We had it before, but it just wasn't in depth. And the more I analyzed those numbers and more I got a conceptualization of seeing that what happened in Idaho, if it happened in California, we have good matches, even with 4 divisions in the Hunter School. The wrestling's decent. Um, but even in California, I think 90% of the kids in each division would be pretty solid. I really think so.
yeah.
There's a lot.
Let's see what can happen. Let's see
Yeah,
what
I
can
just
happen
think the
moving forward.
conversation, there's enough minds here. If they want to do it, we got the statisticians, we got the people that can do it. It has to be the way. We have to do it. And plus, I think they would pack the Bakersfield mechanical. What's it? Mechanic arena.
Mechanics Bank.
I
Mechanics Bank
can't
Arena.
get that in my head. I keep
It's
thinking of
okay.
Rapper Bank. I think for 3 days you would have that place packed with multiple divisions. People will be sticking around because how many guys? I think I'd be interested to see what schools were in the round of 16. Just the schools that are around the 16.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look.
Just
I
look at
mean,
what
there's a
schools
couple
are
like
left there.
South Bakersfield has some tough kids.
Yeah.
I think they brought maybe 6 or 7 qualifiers, and those kids are round of 16. You know, kind of guys. Yeah, I don't know. There's I'd have to go and look.
A vast majority of the state is already at home, right? They've gone. It's Poway. The top 3 teams all scored over 200 points. That's never happened in the history of the CIF state tournament. They
Yeah.
won the first CIF state tournament with 41 points. Granted, it was there might have been 13 weights. It was a carry tournament. So if you lost your first round, you had to get carried. The guy had to make it to the semis to get you back in the
Mm.
consoles, right? So there was less matches, less points. Back in the 70s and early 80s, you only needed 3 or 4 people to win a state tournament. You had 3 studs. That was it. That's all you really needed. And maybe one. Then once they went to even, I think in 19, I don't know if it was early 90s. I think it was 90. We went to an eight placers from 6 to 8. I have to go back and look. Even that first year, I think it was Clovis that won it. They only scored 78 points.
That's wild. Well,
Yeah, I'd
now
have to
it's
go
like
back and look at that.
you need 12 placers, and you need probably 4 or 5 finalists, and
Yeah.
the other guys need to wrestle back and get like third or fourth or fifth. Like that's wild.
And it's not going to change. I mean, I don't blame the power schools. I mean, this is probably one of the best years in California wrestling where you had the top 3 teams that were like right there nationally. Poway was right. That's probably the best Poway team I've ever seen.
Yeah, probably one of the best teams maybe ever in California. I don't think you can argue, especially if you just look at pure data, like the amount of points, 293 points or something like that.
That's a record. It was
Yeah,
270 something with Buchanan. Oh, we're rebuilding this year. You just had 12 guys play.
it's a down year.
Yeah,
Gosh.
you're rebuilding. And Clovis would have won state with the amount of kids they had in the past. So the power teams are getting in St. John Bosco. They got some good guys coming back too. I don't know if they have the depth. I don't think they have the depth to win it, but they're going to be right there in the mix because they're heavyweight. I think Grigor Shalakin's the only one graduating, right?
Yeah, he's gone. Isn't Sahakian? Isn't he gone too? Isn't he going to
Uh,
be a Sun
the
Devil next year?
heavyweight will be a senior next year, I think.
Oh, really? He's only a junior?
I think so.
Oh, dang.
I could be wrong. I think he's only a junior.
And then you have Grajeda and
He's
Antonio,
going to
I
be a
think.
sophomore.
And yeah, they have a lot of freshmen. A lot
Yeah.
of freshmen. And who knows who's coming in next year for them? They always have tough
I'm not
freshmen.
going to say it on the podcast, but my radar's picking up a few people, and you know who they are. Yeah.
Well, maybe we stop recording here and you can give me the inside scoop if you want.
Okay.
If you
Yeah.
want. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to throw any rumors out there, but
No,
you
it's
hear
okay.
things.
Yeah,
You
I hear
know.
things too.
Yeah.
Well, Al, before we go, I know that article is you don't need to give me a timeline because I know sometimes the process and being creative and stuff can be a minute. But where can people find your article?
The any of my articles.
Well, just yeah, find your articles, find your work, follow
Um,
you.
it's on idahosports.com. You just type in my name, Al Fontes, on Google, idahosports.com. If you go to Google, Al Fontes, my name, Idaho Sports, the link to all my articles in Idaho will be on there. Yeah.
Awesome.
And then plus the Wrestling USA magazines. And I'm a contributing writer with a few of the magazines and stuff. And those articles, if you get those magazines, you'll see them
Awesome.
out there.
Well, you're the man, Al. I
I'm trying,
appreciate
man.
you and thank
Yeah.
you for being on the podcast. We're gonna have to get you on again.
Yep. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm really happy you guys are doing this. It's good for the sport.
Thanks, man.
All right.